Everyone has a game they can call their favorite. Some might say theirs is Ocarina of Time or Minecraft, others Half-Life 2 or Red Dead Redemption 2. For me personally, there are two games I may call my favorite ever, Super Mario 64 and Earthbound. Mario 64 is a game I've played countless times throughout my life. It's fun, the worlds are great, and it's a fantastic thing to wind down with. However, Mother 2, otherwise known as Earthbound, comes close. And if I had to pick a game that I love the most now, I'd choose it. A long, well-written story, with great humor, an engaging battle system that leaves the player wanting more, and a plethora of characters you grow attached to. It was one of the first RPGs I ever played. I was in the 6th grade, and like with my N64, I got an SNES that was given to me by an extended family member whose kid moved out and didn't want it anymore. The console didn't come with very many titles, but among the shovelware sat something I didn't quite realize how lucky I was to be gifted with until years later, a legitimate original Earthbound SNES cartridge. That being said, Earthbound isn't that rare of a cartridge, just a really sought after one, going for well over $400 on eBay nowadays. I'm so glad my preteen self didn't break it or throw it away or something. I mean, that's what I did to a lot of Pokemon games because I got that with the N64. That was gifted to me by a family member. My mom thought Pokemon was demonic, so yeah. Pokemon Stadium, Pokemon Stadium and Snap, yeah, they got thrown in the garbage, not even sold or anything. But anyway, I did have some exposure to NES from Super Smash Bros., so I gave it a try. At first, I really did not like it that much, but over time, something just clicked, and I fell in love with Earthbound. Since then, I've become a fairly big fan of the series, and although I haven't really consumed much Mother media over the past few years, I've decided that this year I'm gonna play through every Mother game and make videos on all of them. I already made one on the first Mother not too long ago, so let's get started on its sequel, Mother 2, otherwise known as Earthbound. I literally just said that. Let's just get going. I know I say this in just about every video I make, yet the opening cutscene here is one of my favorites. Red static comes into view, fading out to reveal the site of an alien invasion, while the suspenseful and unnerving track plays. It is a lot darker and creepier compared to the actual game, I'll say that. Now it's time to choose a file. And since I'm playing this on my actual cart on a real SNES, I am kind of worried about the battery dying. To be fair, SNES games almost never die like that, but it had it happen recently with Super Metroid, so I'm a slight bit paranoid. The second you create a new file, that wacky, distinct, unhinged, unique Earthbound feel already is put on full display. The music is kind of weird, you hear a voice when going through the various selections, and even the menu itself feels kind of passive-aggressive with its demands. Moving on to the cast, there's Ness, who I assume everyone is familiar with unless you're a boomer who is watching just some random fishing video and randomly stumbled upon this video. There's Paula, my middle school crush, Jeff the nerd, and Pooh. Yeah, you can tell it's already gonna be a great game when one of the main characters is named after literal shit. After that, you can name your dog. To be frank though, he's such a small part in the story it really doesn't even matter. Then your favorite food and favorite thing. The canon food is steak and the thing is rockin'. What's nice is that there's an I don't care option to easily fill in the official canon names of everyone and everything. With that out of the way though, let's get into the actual adventure. Our story begins in a small town in a country called Eagle Land, sometime in the 90s. What year exactly is anyone's guess, because for some reason the toy wanted to keep it all mysterious with 1990X. Our main hero, Ness, is just minding his own business, just trying to sleep, when he rudely gets awoken by a strange, loud noise from outside. The noise wakes up the whole house, his sister Tracy, his dog King, and his mom, who, I'm gonna be honest, is the hottest character in the whole franchise, by far. His dad is really lucky, I'll say that. She lets Ness go investigate what's going on, as long as he changes out of his pajamas. Although if you don't talk to her and leave, it's possible to play the first part of the game with Ness just in his PJs. When he goes outside, there's all these people out. The police have set up barricades to prevent you from going to Onett, leaving the nearby hill the only place left to go. What I like about this trek is how many spots you can see down below that serve an important part later on, or at least somewhat. And once again, that toy-style humor is already starting to ooze, already outdoing the first Mother by a fair margin. On the top of the hill is a meteorite, and its fall to Earth is what caused that loud sound from earlier. Unfortunately, Ness can't go up to see it firsthand yet, and to make matters worse, we meet who is my favorite and least favorite Mother character of all time, Porky, or Pokey in the English version. One of Ness's neighbors and possibly even his friend, albeit the friend you only hang out with because no one else wants to hang out with you. Pokey Mitch is an insufferable douche. He's arrogant, he can't read the room, etc. When I used to use my chain smoker voice
in videos, I got tons of comments saying that the voice I used was the perfect voice they might imagine for Porky or Pokey using. And there's even some conspiracy comments that I actually am Pokey. I swear I'm not.
That aside, there's not anything else to do for now other than to just return home and go back to sleep. Even deeper into the dead of night, a knocking sound can be heard coming from the front door. It's a fairly realistic sound for the SNES, I'll give it that. Plus, to shave and haircut 2 bits is a nice touch. That's something I would do if I was knocking at someone's door in the dead of night. But I swear, I'm not Pokey, I swear. Ness's mom makes Ness get the door, even though it could be a burglar or a serial killer or something. Thankfully, it's just Pokey, and I just realized I probably shouldn't have said that then, because that kind of gave away the spoiler. Well, to be honest, everyone watching this already played the game, so. He took his little brother Piggy to go see the meteor, and all was fine and dandy until the local gang of Onett, the Sharks, came along to rile up trouble. Pokey, being the pinnacle of bravery, ran off, leaving Piggy behind, so it came to beg Ness to go rescue him before his parents get home and ground his ass. King comes along for the ride too, but before heading out, be sure to equip a cracked bat from Tracy's room and ask her for a cookie. Ness's dad calls. You can use him to save, yada yada yada, let's get going. On the way up the hill are the first enemies. Fairly weak for the most part, yet be careful. I'm usually pretty good at this game, and I still got a game over. At level 2, Ness learns Life Up, a healing move. Don't hesitate to use it, or use food to heal up. Pokey and King don't have an HP bar like Ness. They fall into a category referred to as temporary party members. You can't control them, but they do help out in battles, or at least King does. Pokey just sits there doing nothing other than apologizing to feral animals. When the trio reaches the meteor, King is actually the one who chickens out first. It's always the one you expect the least. Piggy is fine, thankfully. What's this though? Something's coming out of the rock. It's Buzz, a bee he is not. He is a time traveler. 10 years from now, an alien being named Gygus has devastated the universe, widely believed to be the same being as Gygu and Mother. All hope is not lost. A legend from ancient times foretells of a chosen hero, a boy who, along with a girl and 2 other boys, defeat Gygus. Buzz believes that Ness is that boy. Gygas has already put his plan into motion on Earth, corrupting people and animals. Ness must act quickly to stop this apocalypse from happening, and I love how Pokey's reaction to all of this is hoping that he isn't one of the heroes. Thank God he is not. On the way back home, the group is stopped by the first of the invading army's agents, Starman Jr. The following battle is one that you can never lose. Well, technically you can, but it takes effort to do so. All of Starman Jr.'s attacks are negated by the shields Buzz puts up. Spoiled Ness, having to have his fight handed to him on a silver platter, and then actually had to defeat Starman Jr. on his own. Speaking of that, some theorize that Buzz is actually an 10, since he doesn't use any offensive PSI, but that's a discussion for another video. Pokey and Picky don't quite make it home in time, and their parents scold them. These two are pretty crappy parents. The dad's greedy and the mom is just a psycho. It makes a lot of sense why Pokey turns out the way it does. As sad as it is, I'll say that. Despite being able to take down a Starman with ease, Buzz gets gravely injured from a simple slap from Mrs. Minch. With his dying breath, Buzz tells Ness what he must do to save the world. The only way to defeat Gygas is for his power to be united with the planets and multiplied. To do this, he must visit 8 locations on Earth, his sanctuaries, that must be made his own. The first is located in Onett, Giant Step. Buzz gives Ness a special item, called the Sound Stone, which records the melodies played in these locations. With his mission complete, Buzz passes on, and Ness goes out to complete his. Upon going outside, a new day begins in Onett, and now you can explore the town. But I think I'll take the time now to take a break from the story and talk about a lot of the new additions and improvements Mother 2 made compared to the last game. Let's start with the controls. A still brings up a command menu. The map menu has been moved from start to X. The status menu has been cut, but pressing Y or B or select brings up your HP box and money. Start and R do absolutely nothing, while L directly talks to people or checks objects. It's a super convenient addition. I just wish it used a different button than L, since it feels a little awkward playing at times. A cool bonus because of it, however, is the fact that the game can be played with one hand. There's a joke in there somewhere. This isn't really the type of game where you need another hand for something else. You know what, I'm just gonna end it here before this gets more cringe and awkward. One issue I do have with Earthbound is the lack of a run button. Technically, EB0 didn't have a run button either in a Japanese version or in a North American version, because the prototype in the US actually just speeds the game up, but it feels a little odd not being able to run. I guess we've just been so spoiled by newer games and their run buttons. I have a similar experience when revisiting the old Pokemon games too, and to be honest, it's not that bad once you get used to it. It just takes some time. Equipment has its own sub-menu now. There's a lot more total equips than in beginnings, and the equips are typed differently. 4 total item categories can be equipped: weapons, things that go on your head, body, and arms. The only downside is that equipment still takes up item space even when used. Key items still don't have their own special place either, although item storage has been upgraded from 8 per character to 14, which makes up for that. Enemies are no longer encountered randomly either, having their own sprites in the overworld. This fixes the problem the first game had, of there being way too many fights all the time. Each area now typically has a fixed number of foes, and on top of that, you can avoid them too, at least if you can get away in time. Yet another issue from 1 was addressed as well, an issue that plagues so many RPGs it's hardly ever resolved: weak enemies. The behavior of monsters changes the higher level the player is. If they become strong enough, foes will just flee from them. This makes backtracking so much easier and less annoying. Seriously, why do so few RPGs have a system like this? Like, I love Superstar Saga and all, but it gets real irritating when you're at the end game in levels of strength, and a beanie wants to engage in a battle, but you would win at level 2. The cherry on top of this excellent mechanic are back attacks. If the player starts a battle while behind a foe, when the fight starts, the enemy can't fight in the first turn. One downside is that this can happen to you too if you're not careful. Oh, and then one thing I kind of forgot to talk about earlier is this creepy guy. When Ness goes on top of the hill with Pokey and Buzz and Picky, this guy, Liar X, his last name, I can't say, he says that to come back later when he's alone. If you decide to do that, he leads Ness into his basement. Luckily, Ness doesn't get word I cannot say on YouTube, and I really don't want to think about. The guy dug up a golden glowing statue because of a voice in his head, which will come into play later on, I'll say that. I've said I'll say that like 5 times in this video already, and this is probably already at like the 16-minute mark. This video is probably gonna be the longest I've ever made. I'm like a 7th the way through the script, so yeah, this is gonna be a 2-hour video. Now let's visit Onett itself, full of citizens to talk to, stores, restaurants, a hospital, and a hotel. The townsfolk have a lot to say, and it's really worth talking to everyone, not just for useful advice either. A lot of people have golden lines. There's this girl in the hospital that got smashed by a mouse. There is people straight up break the fourth wall. Beatles references, bathrooms always being occupied, burger shop girls smiling, and other, frankly, weird stuff. I love this game. The entrance to Giant Step that Buzz was talking about earlier has been blocked off by the city police. The mayor and city council have been busy trying to stop the sharks from causing their trouble. When Ness tries to meet with the mayor, he gets kicked out. So that leaves you with only one option, to take on the sharks firsthand. They roam around downtown near the arcade. As far as gangs go, well, they look extremely stupid and creepy at the same time, if that makes any sense. Some dude dressed in a latex suit and a hula hoop seems a lot more unhinged than a random mugger, but that's just me. These guys should not be taken lightly. They can mess you up if you're not careful. Bring healing items, grind until Nintendo learns life up to heal, and hypnosis to put them to sleep. Get the Mr. Baseball cap from the secret treehouse, other equips from the drugstore. Just get prepared. While the beginning of Earthbound is not nearly as hard as the beginning of Earthbound 0, compared to the rest of the adventure, is the part I get the most game overs in. Now that I think about it, that's a serious tradition of Mother. The start of each title is usually pretty slow, but they get better as they go on. At the beginning, you don't have any other party members usually, none of that fancy offensive PSI, fights are kind of boring, etc. If anyone watching this has tried playing Earthbound before, if they gave up in the first couple hours, keep playing. I promise you that it gets way better from here. Inside the arcade, which looks pretty cool, I just thought I'd point that out, is the Sharks leader, Frank. The dude literally fights a 13-year-old with knives just because the kid didn't tell him his name. The curse of being a silent protagonist. Besides knives, Frank has another form of attack, swearing. Now the moms of Onett are definitely gonna come after him now. When he's defeated, the victory message says he became tame, like a stray dog. With most other human enemies, the message is something along the lines of, they were defeated, but no. Frank is a wild animal, I guess. It's not over yet, though. You then have to fight a robot friend of his, Frankenstein Mark II. It can do a lot of damage, so again, bring along some burgers. Every other turn it can attack. Use that to your advantage and beat it. Afterwards, Frank has the audacity to play buddy-buddy with Ness, telling Ness about Giant Step, that he surpassed him in strength, all that. Was he supposed to be under Gygas's influence? Is he saying all this just to get on Ness's good side? Or was he just testing Ness? It's one of the few things that I don't really understand that much, and I think the first option is probably the most likely. In any case, the mayor will finally meet with us. For our struggle, he gives us a key to the shack, leading to Giant Step Cave. Like the mayor of Podunk, he's not the most stand-up guy, taking credit for defeating the sharks and refusing to take responsibility if something happens to Ness. What a great guy. Sure hope he runs for president. Which, actually, that would probably be a joke of me not wanting him to run for president, both the way things are going. Maybe he won't be, I probably shouldn't have said that. Because, I try to not talk about politics on this channel. Please don't unsubscribe. Giant Step Cave is full of weak enemies that give out a lot of XP, making grinding for the boss no problem at all. The Antoids can be annoying, but the attack slugs do practically no damage. I really do hate slugs though, they creep me out. Same with snails or anything else slimy. The dungeon is extremely short, only taking around 10 minutes to trek through. At the end is the first sanctuary boss. Great evil beings that have stolen the special spots on Earth that Ness can connect with. This one is Titanic and my sister's worst nightmare. At this point, unless you've been skipping fights, Ness has probably learned PK Rock in Alpha, a powerful move that attacks all enemies but costs a lot of PP. Titanic Ant has 2 black Antoids with him, both of which can use life up to heal him. PK Rockin takes both of them out in one turn. Once they're gone, the fight becomes easy. You'll most likely have enough PP for another Rockin, which brings its HP down enough for 1 or 2 regular attacks to kill it. Once again, bring some burgers along and use those magic butterflies to recover PP before the fight. I was a bit hard level for this when I needed to be. I guess I'm still used to the grind crazy nature of beginnings in Dragon Quest 1 from earlier this year. The area beyond is the actual Giant Step itself. A melody can be heard. Ness catches a glimpse of a small, cute puppy, and using the soundstone Buzzbuzz gives out, you can listen to each of the melodies collected from these places. If you're unfamiliar with Earthbound, this doesn't really make all that much sense. Trust me though, you'll understand more as the story goes on. On the way out, a police officer asks Ness to come with him to the station. Alright, I wonder what they— oh my god, they want to kill me! I can forgive them for putting roadblocks everywhere, and frankly not doing their job, yet this is too far. The police chief is doing this because he wants to test Ness or something, and if he beats his 5 best men, he'll open the road to the next town. Still though, why? The older I get, the more I realize that the government and city officials of the series are incompetent morons or plain corrupt. Just like real life. Political commentary aside, beating 5 guys in a row, don't take that out of context, is quite the challenge. Some say this is the hardest part of the game. Despite being a little over-leveled for this point, I got a game over. It's kind of embarrassing since I made it through the first game with only like 3 deaths. Yet here I am like 2 hours in, and it's easier sequel, and I've almost surpassed that number. Once bested, the police captain sends out some orders to his men to unblock the road leading to the next town, Tucson. Before all of that, however, spend the night at the hotel. Ness will have a dream from a friend he's never met before, Paula. Creepy. The road to Tucson has these annoying rambling mushrooms that can spread spores to mushroomize party members. When a character is mushroomized, it's similar to being confused, only the controls get inverted. Why? Tucson is a bigger city than Onett. Instead of a general store, there's a mall, there's a theater, there's a park, and Polestar Preschool. The place is owned by a couple with a daughter, Paula. Yes, the same girl from the dream, in case you have like a 5-second attention span. From everyone in town, we can learn that she has immense power, being known far and wide for it. However, when Paula's dad tries to call for her, she's not home. She's gone. People around town give some clues. She was kidnapped. The local crime lord, Everdread, says she was taken by cultists to a town they set up to the east, Happy Village. Worst of all, she's gonna be a sacrifice. Damn, that's kind of dark. I mean, it's not mother-free, but I kind of forget how dark this game can be at times. Unfortunately, a giant pencil stands in the way of the valley leading to the town. To progress, visit this guy Apple Kid. He's been starving for days. Give him some food and loan him some money, and in return, he gives Ness a pencil eraser that literally erases the pencil blocking the way to Peaceful Rest Valley. The amount of enemies here is a bit much. So much that I was starting to think somehow my copy got corrupted, and the anti-piracy features kicked in. Yeah, I'll talk more about that later. Happy Village is a cult town, owned by the Happyism cult. Everyone here is obsessed with the color blue. They worship their leader like a god, no one thinks for themselves. The whole ordeal is unsettling. Now that I'm older, I understand the real-life inspirations for the cultist. It's eerily similar to some other tragic events. Well, at least it doesn't end like those ones did, thank God. The ones wearing suits look awfully familiar to another hooded group too. So much that in a North American version they got these Santa hat puffs put on the hoods to make them look less similar. The cult's obsession with the color blue is the only thing keeping Happyism from hitting so close to home that it breaks that sense of escapism. They go so far that even a cow is painted blue. Very lucky that the sky and oceans are blue, or they probably tried dumping paint in the ocean or spray painting the atmosphere or something else stupid. The townsfolk reveal more about what happened to Paula. She isn't gonna be a sacrifice per se. Instead, their leader, Carpainter, wants to make her his high priestess. Another guy says he and his buddy were the ones to kidnap her. Who's the other guy? Well, none other than Pokey. Less than the 5th through the game and he's already betrayed us. Paula's trapped in this cabin. Only Carpainter has the key to her cell. However, it's impossible to beat him unless you talk to her to get the Franklin badge. When confronting Mr. Carpainter, he makes an offer to Ness to become his right-hand man. A tempting offer to be sure, but Ness refuses. Then he engages the player in battle. Without the badge, you'll get struck by lightning and booted from the mansion. Following the fight, he explains his whole ordeal started when he came into possession of a certain statue that amplified his evil thoughts. He gives Ness the cabin key, as well as disbands the cult, with everyone going back to normal just like that, even the blue cow. Paula then joins the party. She can use strong offensive PSI, like PK Fire, Freeze, and Thunder. Her main weakness is how physically weak she is. Compared to Anna though, while she might not have as OP of PSI, at least she doesn't die in a single blow, and her bash attacks do more than 1 damage, even with her ultimate weapons. Personality-wise, Paula is in between Anna and Kumatora. She's slightly tomboyish, at least in the North American version, because in the Japanese original, she was a bit more stereotypically feminine, basically being identical to Anna, if not a bit more feminine. For instance, in the US translation, she says if Ness didn't come, she'd have to figure out a way to bust herself out. In Japan, meanwhile, she says she'd just cry. I mean, to be fair, I'm a full-grown man, and I'd still cry if I was trapped in a cabin by a cult that paints cows blue. There's no shame in that. Also, I have a funny story to tell about her. Well, her name. Despite not knowing a lot about Earthbound when I first played it, I knew it was made by Nintendo. Nintendo was a Japanese company. And one day, me and my friend were talking, and we came to the conclusion all Nintendo characters must be Japanese then. Then another day in a history class, when I was in sixth grade, it was about the spread of Christianity or something like that, and my teacher was mentioning names that came around in this era, and the one that was mentioned was Paula. I'm just gonna wait for that car to go by. Well, I have my gain kind of low, but screw you, car, for breaking my train of thought. Anyway, me being the dumb 11-year-old I was, I raised my hand and asked him in front of the whole class if the name Paula was Japanese. He had no idea what to say to that. From his perspective, that's the most nonsensical question he'd probably ever gotten. Like, just, it makes no goddamn sense without context. Just, yeah. And I can't quite remember how he even responded, other than asking me if my name is Japanese as kind of a retort, like, oh, is your name Japanese? It's a core memory of cringe to me, along with, this is even more cringe, but this was a year later too, so I didn't learn anything, and when I was in 7th grade, we were talking about the American Revolution or something, and I decided to ask if the British soldiers would get mad if you, like, spewed diarrhea on them, or something like that. Yeah. Or when I was in high school, I made a YouTube poop of my principal, and I actually got suspended for that. Yeah, I was a wild kid. Okay, I'm done talking about my childhood cringe for now. There's a cave in the village as well. Paula only starts off at level 1, yet she levels up quickly, getting to level 10 or so in only a dozen fights. The second sanctuary boss can be found here too, Mondo Mole. Be careful, his attacks can kill Paula very easily. Paralysis will cheese this whole battle, making him unable to attack or move at all, leaving him helpless, while 2 preteens beat him to death with bats and frying pans. A pretty sucky way to go if you ask me. Following victory, a second memory enters Ness's mind, one of a baby in a red cap, along with another melody. Returning to Tucson is a good time for all. Everyone is happy that Paula's safe, they're thankful to Ness, some even think him and Paula are a cute couple. Take that, Ness Kiss. And I refuse to talk any more about that in this video. Her parents let her tag along for the adventure ahead, with no hesitation, to the next town, Freed. The town is haunted, with ghosts preventing anyone from entering or leaving. The only way to get there involves getting the help of a fan-favorite musical group, the Runaway 5. The group are basically slaves to the theater's owner, owning a huge debt. You know, as someone who just graduated college, I can kind of relate to that. Everdred luckily happens to have such money that he can't keep, so he gives it to the duo. It is probably best not to ask where this money came from. The Runaway 5 will give Ness a backstage ticket if he brings Paula along. It's a fairly good performance for the 16-bit era, although to be frank, I always kind of doze off during these parts. Using the drug money, the two pay off their debts. I mean, probably a good idea, since whoever might come after Everdred will come for this guy next instead of them. Grateful for their help, the Runaway 5 give the group a ride to Freed. With their obnoxiously loud music, the ghosts leave them alone. Not only is Freed haunted by ghosts, but zombies as well. Perfect. The zombies have struck fear into the townspeople, many of which stay inside their houses and refuse to open their doors. A smart idea considering the circumstances. An anti-zombie resistance movement meets in this tent, although they have no good ideas at the moment. The zombies are led by someone called Belch, who in turn works for Gygas. He's promised to give them back their lives in return for doing his bidding. Everywhere only leads to more dead ends. However, when Ness and Paula visit the hotel after the graveyard, there's this hot woman in a bikini. Following her only leads to their demise. When the two wake up, they're in a dark, cold room underground. Not exactly the best way to start a relationship if you ask me. The two can only wait, as Paula uses her powers to contact a third chosen hero to save their lives. In a land called Winters, a fitting name considering it's based on the UK, is a boarding school. One of the boys, Jeff, has a dream in which Paula's message breaks through. The dude shows no hesitation or doubt in what could just be a weird dream, and immediately takes action to sneak out of his school to save people he's never met. What a guy. Jeff's friend Tony helps him escape the school, and from here he's on his own, at level 1. Like Paula, it doesn't take long at all to grind him up. The enemies give out tons of experience, he levels up quickly, and has more growth stats early on compared to the others. Jeff can't use PSI, the only main character not to learn it in this game. Rather, Jeff can use special items in battle, such as bottle rockets or bazookas to fight with. When resting in a hotel, sometimes Jeff can take broken items and turn them into usable ones. In other words, never throw away any broken items, or else you could miss out on some pretty cool stuff. In a nearby drugstore, Jeff can buy a pack of bubble gum, and along with it, a free monkey. Taking inspiration from the UK and all that, Winters has its very own Loch Ness monster, Tessie. Bubble Monkey grabs its attention, allowing Jeff to ride on its back. Pretty nice of him. I'm glad that Tessie isn't a fierce monster. The only other pieces of media that don't portray the Loch Ness monster like evil creatures are Super Mario 64 and a weird storyline JPEG slideshow I made back in high school. And coincidentally, like the same time I made that YouTube poop of my principal. Maybe I should make a storytime video telling about that whole story, because it's wild, but no one cares about that. Tessie takes Jeff downriver, ending up in a dungeon built by a man named Brick Road. This guy's obsessed with dungeons. He probably has a sexual fetish for them, with how obsessed he is. Even wants to be merged with one. Well, whatever makes you happy, man. I don't judge. Additionally, I find it kind of interesting, despite the internet not really being that big around the time Earthbound was created, modern game terminology like dungeons were already a thing. Another cave lies in Jeff's way, full of yet more weak foes to farm XP off of. Additionally, what appears to be a sanctuary boss lives here too, but only Ness can challenge it, which is a good thing considering this fight is meant for the game's halfway point, so there'd be literally no way to win as Jeff. On the other side, Bubble Monkey sees a cute girl monkey and runs off. Typical. To further solidify Winters being the UK, it has Stonehenge here as well, although, like the Sanctuary boss, nothing can be done in it for quite a while either. Jeff's dad, the world-famous scientist Dr. Onett, has a lab just around the corner. He's not a bad guy per se, but he's not the greatest dad, not having seen his son in 10 years, and Jeff is 13, so the last time he spoke with his son was when he was 3. He helps him reach where he needs to go with the Skyrunner, yet he doesn't seem too excited to see Jeff, and just brushes him off. It's a little depressing, that's for sure. Jeff finally does reach Ness and Paula, after a thorough flyby of many places, a lot of which foreshadow what's to come. The landing could have been better though. After all Jeff went through to save the two, Ness can still say no to being his friend. I have no clue what happens if you do, but come on. Jeff is one of the most stand-up characters in a series for doing all of this. Using a broken key machine, Jeff picks the lock, freeing the trio. As luck would have it, Apple Kid sends a new invention he's been working on, zombie paper. Like flight paper, it takes care of the zombie problem just like that. Some of the dialogue here is hilarious too. I'm gonna try not to mention every single funny line in the game, but come on. There's this guy who wishes there's pretty girl paper, creepy, and this guy who keeps saying in no uncertain terms how he doesn't care what happens to him as long as he can save his own skin. Now that the zombies are no longer a problem, we can take the secret route into the graveyard. Make sure before venturing out, however, you fight this living tent to get a jar of fly honey. On the other side is maybe the most iconic location in the series, Saturn Valley. Anyone who's ever played Smash probably remembers these guys as those weird throw items. They're their own intelligent life forms with their own civilization. Most of them have disappeared due to the same guys wreaked havoc on Freed, Master Belch. The Mr. Saturns have been forced to work in a factory, quite a bit like Duncan's factory from the first Mother. To enter, the player has to do the easiest and hardest thing of all time. Wait 3 minutes without touching any buttons or the control pad. Then we finally get to fight Belch himself, a living pile of puke. I fear to think what goes on in the mind of a toy. Like seriously, this guy is gross. Even burp sound effects play. The wonders of the SNES sound chip. To even be able to beat him, you need that jar of fly honey from Freed, or else it's impossible to win. Other than that, it's yet another easy boss. Gross, yet easy. Belch mentions something called the Manny Manny statue being smuggled by Gygas into the city of Foreside, and that soon the condition of the place will be worse than living in your own puke. Thanks for putting that image in my head, a toy. Anyway, the Mr. Saturns are all freed and return home. One of them offers the trio a cup of coffee. Apparently it was drugged. I mean, how else would you explain this acid trip? Jokes aside, it's a great sequence. Like you're going through Ness's internal monologue of what he's accomplished and what he needs to do. The third Sanctuary boss can be fought right after, and good lord can this fight be hard under-leveled. He has an insta-kill move that it thankfully never used on me, and on top of that, I was over-leveled. I really need to stop over-grinding. This isn't AB0. In any case, we get our third melody. That's more than enough story narration for now, though. Yeah, it's been a bit much, and this is probably gonna be a 2-hour video at the rate it's going. But for now, let's go over more gameplay aspects. Now that we have Jeff and Paula, what might be the greatest addition to Mother 2 is scrolling HP. You've probably seen it multiple times throughout this video. When enemies attack, it takes a few seconds for that HP to deplete. Because of this, you can save a party member from dying if you can manage to heal them in time. This makes the game way easier, especially compared to its prequel, and on top of that, it adds a component of excitement and tension when a teammate takes mortal damage. Should I heal straight away and make everyone else bash or defend, or do I have enough time on my hands to plan out a strategy? After a battle, your current HP and PP count is raised to the same amount as the HP and PP boost of that level up. It's a nice day when you're stuck in a dungeon out of PP, then after a level up, Paula now has enough PP for one more PK freeze. Sometimes, an attack that deals mortal damage can leave a teammate with 1 HP instead of killing them. When this happens, it's because of their guts, a stat that additionally increases the chance of smash attacks as well. I didn't really talk about smash attacks that much in my Mother 1 video. Well, smash attacks are the critical hits of Earthbound, but there's something about them that feels so much better than in, let's say, Pokemon, with their critical hits. For one, the name Smash sounds cooler. Second, it reminds me of Smash Bros. And third, it looks so much cooler visually. Speaking of visuals, the game's graphics, while unpopular at the time, have aged very well, and have a unique vibe to them. In the overworld, all the sprites look like cute, ordinary Charlie Brown-esque characters, yet in battles they can get weird and frankly a bit creepy. The backgrounds can be trippy too, along with certain PSI. I mean, besides Mother 3, what RPGs have fights that look like acid trips? Another weird thing, although this might just be me, is this game looks pretty good in low quality or resolution videos. I used to use a DVD recorder to record footage for my videos, and compared to other SNES titles, Earthbound doesn't look half bad in 240p. I don't know why that is, or if anyone else thinks so, I just thought I'd share that tidbit. I feel that besides gameplay, the biggest difference between Mother 1 and 2 is how much more humorous and weird 2 is compared to 1. Don't get me wrong, Earthbound Beginnings is without a doubt still funny. Earthbound just takes it to 11. For instance, in Beginnings, breadcrumbs could be used to exit a dungeon. Well, here, the item to do that is a mouse that points the way to the exit. Or there's one guy, whose only memento of his dead grandmother is a pair of contact lenses, lost in a desert. And when you bring them back to him, he gives you a pair of his dirty socks. Nice. To further drive home the surreal and weird vibe, this game too had clay models, made to design the sprites of characters and enemies. I said this too in my last video. While I do really like the anime-style fan art I see by guys like this, claymation would complement the wacky nature of the series better. Speaking of wacky, the enemies are some of the most hilarious ideas for ones I've ever seen in a game. Hippies, worthless protoplasms, drunk old men, and Ran boobs. Whoever snuck the boob on Ran boob deserves a medal. Phones have been upgraded to be able to call over numbers besides dad to save the game. Ness can call his mom, can order pizza, a club much later on in the game that doesn't really serve much purpose after one call. Even numbers players are gonna call more often than any other besides dad. VS Cargo Express. They offer a service to hold on to items, most important of all, key items that can't be thrown away. After being called, the delivery guy runs up in mere seconds to either pick up or return stuff. A complaint I do have is they can only transfer 3 items at a time, or at $18 fee. It's unique, it's funny and all that, but something like the PC system of Pokemon would have been so much more convenient. The speed of text has 3 settings: slow, medium, and fast. In the past, I went with medium. This time I went with fast, and while some text might be too fast for viewers to read, it makes battles way faster paced. When buying equipment from stores, you get the option to equip them right there. Not only that, but they'll offer to buy the previous equipment too, which saves so much time. Sometimes in the overworld, these magic butterflies can be found floating on by. Touching them restores 20 PP, which can be a lifesaver at times. Condiments are an aspect I find cool. I just never use them. You can buy salt or parsley and put them on food to make them better. But again, I just kind of forget about them. Once again, let's get back to the story for a while. With Belch gone, Freed actually becomes a nice place to live once again, almost unrecognizable. And that one guy who kept reiterating about how much he doesn't care about anyone but himself, he's shocked that his family doesn't want to speak to him. Between Freed and Foreside is a massive desert, one of my favorites in gaming, especially since it's based on the American Southwest instead of Egypt. Well, there's another one based on Egypt later on, but my point still stands. Foreside is an enormous city, in canon at least, because in content, it is less than Tucson and Onett. Kind of a shame if you ask me. Similar to how I imagine Windfall Island when I imagine a pre-industrial city, I imagine Foreside when I try to imagine a modern, prosperous city. Just like in the real world, Foreside is in the back pocket of a rich man, Monotali. I can't say that. He was once an ordinary man, but one day got a hold of a mysterious power. Now the police force, the print, and most of the residents are die-hard supporters of his. The Runaway Five have once again become debt slaves, this time the Foreside's feeder. Seriously guys, you couldn't at least have read the contract this time before signing it, just this once? The money they owe is a lot too, $1 million. The only way to pay it back is if Ness somehow finds buried gold. As luck would have it, on the way to the city, we pass some miners digging for gold. Returning there, the miners need the group's help to clear the mine of 5 killer moles. First off is this one, the 3rd strongest. Then there's this one, also the 3rd strongest. Then the 3rd strongest, after that the 3rd strongest, and then finally we have the 3rd strongest. It reminds me a lot about those rabbits in Mario 64 DS. Later, the miners give the trio a diamond they found. If you give it to the feeder's owner, she rips that contract. And once again, the Runaway Five are free. This time, please think before signing a contract, guys. They give one more show, and who's this? It's the hottest character in the game, well, after Ness's mom, Venus. Thankfully, she'll stand a feeder at the very least. The next coming segment sucks in relation to the rest of the story. In the department store, Paula gets kidnapped again. What does that make it? 3 times now that she's been trapped, waiting for someone to rescue her. If she keeps this up, she'll be in Peach's league before long. This part is where you'll start to realize how much you took Paula for granted. Without her powerful PSI almost one-shotting every enemy, it takes way longer to beat foes now, and if you're not careful, you can die very easily. The one behind Paula's third kidnapping works for Gygas too, the department store spook. In the next few minutes it takes to take him out, Paula's already been moved somewhere else. In Monotali's tower, it's none other than Pokey. He's become Monotali's right-hand man, giving him economic and political advice. Good for him, I guess. Things escalate fast in Foreside. Not long after, Everdred is found half dead outside the cafe. He talks about the statue Carpenter had and how he tried to smuggle it into Foreside, where Monotali tricked him into giving it up. Monotali's powers come from the statue, the Many statue. With his last breath, Everdred tells Ness to check behind a cafe counter. Well, not actually, because they couldn't have an on-screen death like this, so Everdred walks off, leaving his fate ambiguous. Behind a forbidden counter lies drugs again. This is Moonside, where no means yes and yes means no. Yeah, there's a joke in there somewhere. Another dark joke. Nothing makes sense in Moonside, to be frank, while the enemies are even stranger. All around stand these blonde guys in sunglasses. Talking to them teleports a player around the city, most of which to this spot in front of a sailor guy. He won't let you through unless you have a guy with a connected eyebrow and gold tooth. One of the guys teleports Ness and Jeff to a certain room containing said guy. The sailor finally lets the group pass, going with him to get a drink. Put that in top 10 Nintendo innuendos. After that, it's time to face the Many statue once and for all. Do not take this fight lightly. It knows PK Flash, which can instant KO sometimes. The statue kinda looks how Gaigu did in the first Mother, leading some to speculate that the Many statue is actually his former body. That is, if Gaigu and Gygas are the same being. They're pretty likely to be, but as you'll see later on, he's changed quite a bit to say the least. Following the statue's destruction, the illusions are stopped. The whole Moonside saga was just a vision created by the statue in a cafe's warehouse. Good to know, otherwise this would have been somewhat awkward if Ness and Jeff were wandering around Foreside, appearing high out of their minds and attacking random people. Apple Kid has yet another invention for the group, a trout-flavored yogurt dispenser. Yummy. As luck would have it, the maid for Poke in the Monotali building loves the stuff, and is willing to let the boys in to give it to her. Despite being a genius, Apple Kid got the worst possible mail delivery service ever. The guy straight up leaves the package in a desert. To be fair, that's still better service than USPS. A quick detour over there includes a monkey cave, very similar to the one well in Majora's Mask, where you give NPCs items to open the way to more rooms with more items, and then exchange those items with more NPCs, rinse and repeat. What's strange is this section, and the whole Ness and Jeff solo saga, typically is my least favorite part of Earthbound after maybe the very start or the very end. For some reason, however, in this playthrough, it was where I began to have quite a bit of fun, and I really got into the game. I don't know why. It's kind of strange. The psychic master, Talarama, lives in the heart of the cave. He gives more insight on the stakes, the future, and gives two very useful things. First is that yogurt machine. Secondly, his student teaches Ness the power of teleportation. From here on out, the world becomes a lot smaller. All it takes is the press of a few buttons, along with a little room, and boom, you're at your destination. Pokey's maid leads Vatoon to take the yogurt machine. Now it's time to rescue Paula. The Runaway Five come in to help too. When confronted, Monotali too turns out to not be a totally evil man either. Paula is perfectly fine, with not a scratch on her. The two of them even grew close the past few hours, or days, or months, or however long canonically the series of events take place. Anyway, when he possessed a statue, he would hear a voice telling him to stop Ness and not let him go to Summers, the voice of Gygas. He offers to let the free ride his helicopter to get there. Unfortunately, Pokey ditches Monotali now that he's lost all his power, taking his helicopter with him. Paula gets another vision about Freed. Runaway 5 are more than willing to give the group another ride over there. Some of the townsfolk fix the Skyrunner. Jeff makes a quick detour to Winters to get his dad to help him finalize the preparations needed to get to Summers, and in the meantime, the player gets to explore around for a little bit. Remember that cave from earlier? Well, it's finally time to check out that sanctuary boss, Shroom. This boss holds a special place in my heart, as the first gameplay footage I ever captured was this very boss fight on a DVD recorder. I doubt anyone else cares about that, but it means a lot to me. Shroom is an easy, yet difficult boss at the same time. His attacks don't do much damage. What makes the battle tough is his mushroomization move. When mushroomized, it's like being confused, only with reverse controls outside of battle, and for the cherry on top, it can't be cured with healing moves or items, only in specific healing spots or from healers and hospitals. For me, Ness was the one who got mushroomized, in which case, you do not dare use PK Rockin' unless you really want to risk wiping out your whole team in one shot. The sanctuary Shroom was guarding has gotta be one of my favorites, the Rainy Circle. Rain always relaxes me. I just wish more games had rain effects. In any case, Ness catches a whiff of steak. If you named your favorite food something else, like something gross, like piss, that'll probably ruin the whole tone of the scene. It would be pretty funny though. Well, with 4 melodies collected, the game's already halfway over. And hopefully this video too, because I really don't want to become one of those video essayists man-carrying thing makes comedy sketches about, or Chad Cat or whatever his name is, makes like a 15-second ADHD video about this, which is, it's kind of ironic because I don't quite have ADHD, but I cannot sit through very long videos either, and here I am making a super long video. Yeah, I promise this is gonna be the last really long video I make for quite a while. I mean, mother free, but anyway, I'm gonna make sure the video is coming here soon, I promise. Summers comes next, an area that I typically didn't pay all that much attention to, but this time around had a lot of fun with. It's kind of weird that the areas I enjoy the least are the ones I enjoyed the most this time around. Summers is a popular vacation spot in Tourist Trap. Everything here is ridiculously expensive. Props to Nez's dad for paying for all of this. One attraction in particular is the biggest tourist trap of all, the Stoic Club, full of brain-dead intellectuals paying for high-priced water. One guy in the club actually drops the whole late-stage capitalism bit. Yes, there's a Nintendo game that has a character that critiques capitalism. Please do not let this video's comment section become a political battleground, please. This one woman in the club sells magic cakes, and Ness just can't get a break from being drugged. Poor kid. In the Far East lies the land of Dalam. Today, its prince starts his final challenge in mood training. His name? Pooh. Oh wow, that actually shifted my pop filter. It's kind of hard to take him seriously though with a name like that, especially with him being the most uptight of the main cast, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Dalam is one of those self-deprecating Asian stereotypical lands Japan likes to make about themselves for some reason. I have to say though that Pooh has got it made. I mean, being a prince is great on its own, but basically the entire female population of the country are infatuated with him. The dude's got quite a selection of options, I'll say. Also, I appreciate that they didn't go with the whole cliche route of the main character being the ladies' man. In his final test, Pooh meditates on top of a mountain, summoning the spirit of his ancestors. This spirit must hate Pooh. I mean, I get that it's a trial and all that. Still, Pooh gets his legs broken, his arms ripped off, his ears cut off, his sight stolen, and then is left in complete sensory deprivation. He's finally asked to give up his mind too. Well, to be honest, at that point I'd rather be dead than exist paralyzed, deaf, and blind. What's even better to living like that? Luckily for Pooh, it was all just a test, but he passed with flying colors. His master tells him about the prophecy of Gygas, the chosen four, that he's one of them. Immediately, he seeks out for Ness, arriving in Summers. Even though he's a crown prince, Pooh submits to Ness without hesitation. Pooh, by all accounts, should be the main character. All his training, his status, his luck with the ladies, but no. He's not angry, he's not resentful, he just puts his life in the hands of a commoner he just met. I don't hear enough people talk about just how good of people the Chosen Four are. I love my nuanced, gray main cast here and now. It just feels good to have a party of stand-up moral people for a change. Now that Pooh's in the party, I can finally talk about PSI in full. PSI, once again, is the equivalent to magic. You've got your healers, your status inflictors, and your offensive moves. Let's start with the offensive moves. First off, some new ones were added, my favorite being PK Rockin'. Rockin' is named after what the player enters for their favorite thing. I've gotten so many comments on PSI compilation videos asking why their PK Rockin' isn't named that. So if you didn't know that, well, there you go. Rockin' does massive damage to all enemies, at the expense of a lot of PP. Usually, it should only be used in dire situations to conserve PP to heal, especially since early on, Ness is the only healer, and doesn't have much PP, and on top of that, only he can learn it. But oh man, is it satisfying to use. The animations and sound effects are pleasing to look at, and each variant of the move have their own neat variations. My favorite is Rockin' Beta. Rockin' isn't an elemental type move, like Thunder or Freeze, so no enemies are weaker to it than others. Towards the end of the journey, when Ness has a lot more PP, I use it a lot more often, and that does take away a little bit of that last resort screen nuke element it had. Unlike Love and Mother 3, PK Rockin' is learned with level ups instead of being learned with special events in a story. So if someone really wanted to have Rockin' Gamma for a first boss, there's nothing to stop you from getting it other than the 30 hours it would take to grind to learn it. Also, while I'm at it, pretty much every PSI move in this game are learned with level ups instead of like Psychic Fevers or randomly learning them at the end of battle like in Mother 1. Rockin' Omega is the most powerful PSI attack in the franchise, doing upwards of nearly 1,000 damage. On the downside, it costs almost 100 PP. Another Ness exclusive move is PK Flash. You may remember this from Smash Bros, although it works way differently here than it did there. When Flash is used, it can do 5 different things to an enemy. It can not work and do absolutely nothing, it can confuse them, lower their accuracy, can paralyze them, or best of all, insta-kill them. The higher levels of Flash have a greater chance of achieving the more favorable outcomes, such as paralysis or one-hit KOs. The move's a mixed bag overall. Flash Alpha is basically useless, while Omega can be OP as hell given the circumstances. The biggest issue I have with Flash is how it never wants to work, which goes for tons of other moves like Hypnosis or Brain Shock. Most of the time, it's just not worth using them, unless it's a long and hard boss fight, any other fight, and what's the point of wasting a turn to maybe confuse some foes that are going to die in a couple blows anyway. Surprisingly though, certain bosses can be insta-killed with Flash, which is pretty cool and actually had it happen to me with one boss. The last new offensive PSI introduced in Mother 2 is PK Starstorm! Sorry about the ear rape. A Pooh exclusive move. It's very similar to Rockin', doing massive damage to all enemies. The main difference between the two are 1. Starstorm only has 2 variants, Alpha and Omega, instead of Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Beta. Omega got Beta and Gamma switched up. And 2. Starstorm is learned with special events instead of level ups. And 3. Starstorm does a little less damage overall. The rest of the offensive moves are those returning from the last game. PK Fire, PK Freeze, and Thunder. Beam was cut unfortunately. PK Fire behaves pretty much the same way it did before, doing medium-sized damage to all enemies in a row. This game introduced a system of a front and back row. While Rocket and Starstorm hit everything regardless of rows, Fire can only hit one row. Weirdly, a corrupt ton of enemies seem to be weak to PK Fire, more than the others, which kind of sucks with how much PP it takes and the fact that a lot of times with the rows, like a boss or something, it just costs so much more PP. PK Freeze does a crap ton of damage to a single foe, especially any organic ones. For a bonus, it can solidify an opponent, or in other words, freeze them for a time. PK Thunder is way different in Earthbound compared to Beginnings, more so than any other PSI. Each variant has a certain number of Thunderbolts. Alpha has 1, Beta 2, Gamma 3, and Omega 4. You can't control which enemy these bolts hit, and sometimes they won't hit anything at all. Sometimes Thunder can cause paralysis, plus some foes are weak to it. Most of the time though, it's just not worth using, just use Freeze. Life Up recovers health, while Healing cures status ailments. Don't get the two mixed up. PSI Magnet drains PP from enemies. For a long time, I thought it was one of the most useless attacks in the series. During this playthrough though, I've come to realize just how useful it can be in certain situations, like dungeons, since there aren't that many PP recovering items, especially early on. Hypnosis, once again, never wants to work. Paralysis can be OP as well, since when you're numb, you can't use any physical attacks. Plus, unlike being asleep, it doesn't wear off with time. The only way to cure it is with either items, or like healing Gamma, or certain healing locations. Yeah, healing Gamma. The same kind of healing that is necessary to bring a party member back to life is what it takes to cure paralysis. So when you're paralyzed, yes, it kind of sucks. Brain shock doesn't really come in handy all that often either, since like hypnosis, it never wants to work. But when it does, foes can sometimes attack themselves. Shields are a whole league of their own. There are physical ones or psychic ones, each of which have 2 variants on top of that, regular and power. Regular shields lower the damage taken by half. Power shields counteract the attacker. PSI plane shields absorb PSI attacks, while PSI power shields reflect the move back at them, which is sweet. Defense down and offense up don't come in quite as handy as they did in Mother 1 or 3. Most of the time, I just kind of forget about them if I'm being honest. There are 2 types of teleport, Alpha and Beta. Alpha runs in a straight line. However, you can now turn to teleport in tighter spaces. Beta spins the group in a circle, although it can only be learned by Pooh for most of the game. The distribution of PSI is much better in Mother 2 as well. Ness doesn't learn that much in terms of offense, yet it's better than nothing unlike Nintendo. He learns most of the recovery stuff, and has a decent amount of assist moves. Paula learns a crap ton of attacks, has a modest collection of assist, but doesn't learn life up or healing. The only PSI user in the series to not learn at least one variant of each. Pooh is the only 3rd PSI user in a party out of all the installments. As such, he overlaps a lot with Ness and Paula. Overall, he's kind of a mix of both. He has a modest arsenal of offensive spells, he can heal, and he has his own pool of assist moves. Outside of his PSI, Pooh is just a weird character. He has a hard time eating normal food items, being so used to his typical Dalam cuisine, so he needs his own special foods. Well, kind of, since Life Up is a thing. And one of the Lom's best foods, brain food lunches, also work good on Ness and Paula, recovering a lot of HP and PP. Speaking of PP, Pooh can recover a lot more from drinking water than the other two. I really hope someone clips the audio from that sentence and sends it to someone who has no clue what the context is. Pooh is picky with equipment too, only having one equipable item of each category. These equips can't be just bought either. All of them have their own special locations. 3 of the 4 are fairly easy to get. The last one though, his weapon, is not. This weapon, the Sword of Kings, is infamous for being hard to obtain. It's only dropped by a certain enemy, the Starman Super, with only a 1 in 128 chance of dropping it. Yeah, it's a pain to get. And the last thing regarding Pooh is his mirror ability. When used, Pooh can transform into an enemy, learning its moves. The only downside is the player can't control him once he's transformed. Paula and Jeff have their own free-to-use powers as well, that I forgot to mention earlier. Paula can pray. When she does, it can do all kinds of weird things, from healing to doing damage to bringing enemies back to life. It's a gamble to use, since it can harm the party instead of helping them sometimes. Jeff can spy on foes, learning their stats, weaknesses, and sometimes can spot an item an enemy holds. And now that we have the chance, let's go into a bit more detail about Jeff's items now too. Jeff, if used correctly, can become the most OP character in the series. Most people just don't know or forget to buy or fix broken items. Bottle rockets do good damage, and in total, there are 3 varieties: regular, big, and multi-bottle. Multi-bottle rockets put every single PSI to shame, even Rock and Omega, doing thousands of damage. Jeff is basically a god when he has some in his inventory. The shield killer can, well, kill shields. His counter PSI device disables enemies' PSI. The neutralizer negates any PSI boosts in battle. The defense shower raises the team's defense, and the slime generator immobilizes foes. Then there's the HP suckers. They don't do much damage, but they do steal HP. And lastly are the bazookas, the heavy variant being the best item besides the multi-bottle rockets. The heavy bazooka does more damage than a normal attack, as well as damages the enemy next to it. It never breaks either. In fact, none of Jeff's weapons do. All of them except for the bottle rockets can be used forever. Retail copies of Earthbound came with a strategy guide, which I unfortunately do not own, and they sell on eBay for hundreds if not thousands of dollars. I really wish I had it though. I mean, look at how cool the illustrations look. There is a charm this stuff had that can't be replicated by online guides or wikis. Nintendo has actually released it on their website as a PDF at least, in case you want to experience it all yourself. It is a little weird though, like, why is there such an emphasis on puke? Which brings me to the elephant in the room: the game's commercial failure. While Earthbound did pretty decently in Japan, when it released in the US it flopped hard. It was kind of a hard title to advertise. RPGs were a niche genre at the time, and it released during a time where people were getting ready for the next generation of consoles, with their whole fancy 3D graphics. To make things even worse, the advertisements were terrible, having a slogan like "This game stinks." While quirky, it doesn't sell copies. Commercials were even worse, not even showing proper gameplay. People online do exaggerate the commercial failure just a little though. Earthbound still sold over 100,000 copies. While it's not a lot, it's nothing compared to, let's say, Shantae with its 20,000 copies. While Earthbound is overall an awesome game, it does have a few flaws like any other masterpiece does. In my opinion though, the biggest is the slowdown. When there's too many sprites on screen, the game slows down a lot, and I mean a lot. Most games have at least a little slowdown at times, yet in Earthbound it happens way too often. A lot of times, just a few enemies is all it takes to go from walking normally to moving like slugs. It gets kind of annoying, especially at first. After a while though, you do get used to it. You might think that emulating Earthbound instead of playing it on an actual SNES would solve this issue, but No, from what I hear, it happens even if you emulate it. Sometimes a lot of enemies spawn, making the slowdown even more obvious and painful. A fun fact though, Earthbound may have the greatest anti-piracy feature of all time, even better than those stupid fake creepypasta anti-piracy screens that popped up all over YouTube a couple years ago. There are multiple layers of protection, starting off with just error screens. If you crack these but don't crack all of them, you can still play the game. Oh yeah, just with an added twist of making your playthrough as hellish as possible. Way more enemies show up, so many that it borderline freezes the game, making any pirate's playthroughs painful. If they somehow make it to the final boss, the game will finally crash and erase all of their save files. I cannot imagine someone's reaction if this happened to them, or if it's actually ever legitimately happened to someone, since by today's standards, it is incredibly easy to bypass these anti-piracy features. Despite me playing this on an actual SNES cart right now, there were still times in my playthrough where I was worried that something went wrong with it, somehow activating the anti-piracy mechanisms. A lot of foe spawning is normal most of the time, and even if you are worried about any of this, there are ways to find out, like these glitchy spiteful crows in Onett. Moving on to things I don't like about this game again, Ness is a mama boy at heart. I mean, the series is called Mother for a reason, but getting homesick is annoying. Spending too much time away from home, mostly in dungeons, causes Ness to become homesick sometimes. When he's homesick, Ness will sometimes spend turns refusing to battle. The only way to cure it is to call his mom. And I love that one of his mom's lines is how he has a new girlfriend, implying that he has an ex. Poor Paula. Throughout the adventure, a cameraman shows up at random points to photograph Ness and co. It's pretty cute, it's random, I love the idea, I love the fuzzy pickle line. The only issue is I feel like he shows up a little too often. Sure, the frequency of his photo shoots does have a legitimate reason that players are going to get to see at the end, yet that doesn't make it any less annoying when you're just trying to get somewhere and this guy shows up wasting like 20 seconds of your life. This is an unpopular opinion, I know. Again, overall though, I like the concept since it brings a certain charm. Again though, he shows up just a little too often. Sometimes multiple times within a few minutes, and I am not kidding on that. When a party member dies, all text turns into this pinkish color. I hate the way it looks. And was it really all that necessary? Did the devs think players would be stupid enough not to realize that dead party members are a bad thing? And the last negative thing I have to say has less to do with Earthbound itself and more to do with my gameplay capture method. Since I am playing this on an actual SNES, I had to try to make the video quality at least somewhat decent. So I went out and spent more money than I probably should have to buy a retro tank. Overall, the video quality is massively improved, but some things still look a little off. The most notable being when a screen goes black for a few seconds, the screen becomes super blurry in a few following seconds after. That being said, using it still beats using composite cables on a DVD recorder and then taking a DVD and putting your computer and not even ripping it, just screen recording that and, you know, using the worst capture software to do so. Yeah, any day of the week. Because yeah, like, look how bad my videos used to look. Yet once again, onto the story. The Summers Museum has some important info. Apparently, in Scaraba, there is a pyramid built to protect against invaders. They hide in a place even farther away than a land called the Lost Underworld, shrouded in deep darkness, that can only be lifted with a hawk eye. Before taking care of all of that, however, 2 whole sanctuaries can be completed. To unlock the first, this museum professor makes the quartet get an autograph from Venus. Why on earth then does she show up in the middle of her performance? Like, what a creep. although Venus herself may actually be worse / is worse, because when she gives Ness her autograph on a banana peel of all things, she gives him a kiss too. Venus, he's 13, you know, or maybe even 12 depending on, if it's a Japanese or North American release. Either way, I hope you're happy when 30 years from now, on Twitter, people find out about this and cancel you. And I would say go to jail, but she's a celebrity. When's the last time a celebrity has gone to jail over anything to do with minors? So, the next dungeon takes place in the sewers of Foreside. How fitting that this is the first one we explore after getting poo. The 5th sanctuary boss is the Plague Rat of Doom. Look at that shit-eating grin. What's he so happy about? His flesh is rotting off his back. He's one of those bosses that can be killed with flash, and I was just so lucky enough for this to happen to me. Overall, he's probably the easiest sanctuary boss, and like always, afterwards, a new melody is collected. The 6th sanctuary lies back in the Lom, another fairly easy one, both the dungeon and the boss. The dungeon is short, albeit a bit confusing, with super weak enemies. Thunder and Storm is the sanctuary guardian, or I should say guardian, since there are 2 of them. Well, kind of at least, because the 2 of them act as one unit in battle. There is a great deal of questions I have about the 2's relationship, but I'll never be answered. Flash can insta-KO them too, although this time I had no luck. Once again, victory unlocks yet another melody. Back in Summers, again, the husband of that weird cake lady is willing to give our heroes a ride across the sea to Scaraba. The ship gets attacked by none other than a monster from the Greek mythos, the Kraken. Funnily enough, this was my first exposure to the creature, much like ATMs. When I was in 7th grade, gonna bring this up real fast, we watched Clash of the Titans in some English class. I can't remember the name of it, but thankfully this time I didn't embarrass myself in class like I did with the whole Japanese Paula incident. But I didn't take the Kraken seriously enough this time around. It's an easy boss. I've just been steamrolling every fight for a good while, so I decided to mess around. Little did I remember that the Kraken has a really strong fire attack that was able to kill everyone but Ness. Scaraba is basically Egypt, with sand, those Middle Eastern style buildings, and a crap ton of stereotypes that I doubt anyone legit cares about, except for maybe a few chronically online Redditors. Also, Pokey took a dump here, and it called Poo Poo. The tablet from the museum says to dance in front of the Sphinx in a specific order. Doing that opens a secret chamber. Even though I say I'm not really much of a fan of ancient Egypt themed worlds and games, this one stands out as one of the better ones. There is a lot more of a real ancient Egyptian vibe, while most others feel a bit more generic. The pyramid holds a special item that pierces the darkness, the Hawk's Eye. On the way out, an old wise man takes Pooh away to train him to learn Starstorm. Just dandy. In the grand scale of things, Pooh is barely in the party for most of the adventure. I mean, why couldn't Jeff be the one to be taken away for a while? Dungeon Man has finally had his dream fulfilled, to become a living, breathing dungeon. He can briefly become an unplayable party member, then he becomes stuck for all of eternity between 2 trees. And lastly, it gives the group a submarine that Jeff uses to cross a body of water into the deep darkness. This swamp is massive, full of head-deep water, leaving the group unable to breathe at times, depleting HP and causing annoying red flashing. Master Belch comes back to stop the group, taking on a new name, Master Barf. A bit grosser. Pooh comes in at the end of the fight, using Starstorm to defeat Barf, and without a word rejoins the party. That didn't last very long at all. In the depths of deep darkness is Tenda Village, inhabited by shy creatures, known as Tendas. They speak of a lost world, full of dinosaurs, but there's a boulder in the way. To progress, the crew has to go get a book called Overcoming Shyness. As it would just so happen, Apple Kid has rented the book while working on a machine to defeat Gygus, a phase distorter. During his phone call, a noise can be heard, sounding like a struggle. The news going around as of late mentions a series of mysterious kidnappings around Winters. Dr. Onnett's lab is completely empty, except for Apple Kid's mouse. Spilling the beans on a nearby prison, he, along with many others, were taken to, and gives them an eraser to finally enter the area below Stonehenge. This is the Stonehenge base, an area I really liked as a kid. This time around though, I was more pissed off at the game than the rest of the playthrough combined, because of the whole Sword of Kings thing. I spent 4 hours attempting to get this thing, but nothing! And on top of that, around the same time I realized, a lot of shit started happening, like I hadn't heard anything back about a job application, a package got delayed a few days. I was really stressing over a lot of details about this video, the mic quality, the script, how my footage looked. My Mother 1 retrospective video stopped getting views, and worst of all, there was a massive tornado not too far from the town I live. With all that off my chest, I do have a fascination with Stonehenge, the mystery of who built it and what it was meant for. In the world of Mother, Stonehenge is an old military base from a past alien invasion, recently being reused by Gygus for his conquest. The leader of the base, a Sermon Deluxe, talks about something called the Apple of Enlightenment, predicting the defeat of Gygus at the hands of the Chosen Four. In the following fight, I decided to put up psychic power shields on the whole party, and then he used PK Starstorm. It deflected it back at him, so he basically killed himself with his own PK Starstorm, so that was pretty funny. Everyone is freed, including Jeff's quote-unquote friend, Tony, Dr. Onett, some rando civilians, and Apple Kid. Unfortunately, he returned a book to Onett's library, so you have to return it real fast to get it. The Tendas use the book to finally overcome their shyness. One of them offers Ness and Co. a cup of tea. If you accept, another cutscene plays similar to the one that did in Saturn Valley. To sum it all up, Ness has come far, his powers have grown. Gygus now fears him and searches for ways to end his journey. The music of Tenda Village might be the most "the game's almost over" or near game area songs I've ever heard. I can't quite describe why exactly. Maybe because of the slow feel, or maybe it's just because I associate it with the end so much. One of the Tendas finally removes that boulder. Beyond is another sanctuary dungeon, full of fobbies, easy enemies to grind off if you need to. It's a little maze-like, the enemy spawn rate is a little high, yet the boss, Electro Spectre, is another insanely easy boss, although that's probably because I'm over-leveled. But other games are just really weird like that. As they go on, they get easier and harder at the same time. This sanctuary is one of the more intriguing ones, writing Ness's thoughts on the wall. Good thing he wasn't thinking of anything embarrassing or about Paula, or that would have been a very awkward situation. A seventh melody is heard, and with that, only one more remains. Conveniently, the warp to the next land is right there in Lumaine Hall, a hole leading to a lost underworld. The Lost Underworld. Not exactly the most creative name I know. Dinosaurs still exist here, being some of the strongest and most annoying enemies to fight. The worst aspect about this area by far is the easiest to spot just by watching. The tiny sprites. I don't like it at all. Thankfully, the Lost Underworld is incredibly short and small. All you have to do is visit a Tenda settlement and talk to this rock. He talks about every sanctuary. While players have to beat most to progress up to this point, such as Giant Step, there are a few here and there they can skip or miss, like Little Put Steps. So for players who didn't have a strategy guide or the internet, he'd be pretty useful. Some optional side quests can be completed too, and by optional side quests I mean there are 4 items scattered around that take 2 minutes to get. Oh, and there's one dino, a Chompasaur. Like the Sturman Super, he is an item with a 1 in 128 drop rate, the magic frying pan, Paula's ultimate weapon. While I had the worst luck of all time getting the Sword of Kings, where I didn't get it, I actually lucked out this time, and got the magic frying pan without even grinding or trying or intending to get it. Too bad it kinda sucks though, it misses a lot, it actually lowers her attack, yet raises her guts massively. Whether or not the trade is worth it, I'll leave it up to you. The final sanctuary thankfully ditches the whole small sprite large world mechanic, the fire spring. While most sanctuary dungeons I don't think all that much about, this one's special. It's inside of a frickin' volcano. Is there anywhere else on Earth that's more dangerous than that? Most of the other sanctuaries are either plain generic caves, except for Magnet Hill, but come on, look at this lava, it looks way cooler than a sewer. Less gross too. At the end, Ness must face his final foe, Carbon Dog. This fight can be tough unprepared. Once again though, I was over-leveled. I swear, me over-leveling really took away a lot of the enjoyment I usually have with this game. Carbon Dog has a second form, Diamond Dog, with a deflection shield. Its most powerful attack is a bite that diamondizes party members, or in other words, insta-kills them, which never happened to me in this fight fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, so I could have, a more fun fight. Funnily enough, if you confuse it either with PK Flash or Brain Shock, Diamond Dog can diamondize and insta-kill itself. And I really wish I could have done that. Upon victory, the last melody can be heard. Ness then gets a flashback to his earliest memory, his birth. This moment is my favorite in the whole series after the end of Mother 3. The music that plays is a remix of the 8 melodies. It sounds similar to a nursery rhyme, or like something else you'd hear in your early childhood. There's no other track that I can think about that reminds me of my early childhood, at least that I didn't hear at that age. The way his parents talk about him, about what they want him to be. It all brings a tear to my eye from being so nostalgic. That's what the Mother games deep down are all about, especially this one, growing up. When I initially first played Earthbound, I was about the same age as Ness, going through that stage of life of no longer being a child. But over the years, there's never been a moment where this moment right here stops being relatable. I could relate to it when I became a teenager, when I graduated high school, and just now after finishing college. And I'm sure that there's gonna be a lot more moments in my life where I take a look at this cutscene, and not only can I still relate to it, but I see it in a new light. When Ness awakens from his flashback, he's now in Magicant, a strange world deep within his mind, built from his memories. A lot of characters, both friend and foe, show up throughout, including his past self. When the two talk, his past self doesn't understand his present self. Yet another moment of the game where I feel like everyone, no matter their age, can relate to. Nothing really makes all that much sense. The color changes constantly, and there's flowers that look similar to something else, I'll say that. Pokey shows up in Magicant too, not as Ness's enemy but friend. Even after all he's done, Ness still doesn't hate Pokey in his subconscious. One thing I forgot to mention in my Mother 1 video were the Flying Men. They can join the main character temporarily, only in Magicant. In battles that can't be controlled, but can really help out by either attacking or taking hits for Ness. If one of them dies, they get a grave next to their house. then another flying man can be recruited. If that one dies, another grave spawns, and so on until all of them are dead. It's a good idea to take one along, because with the sudden loss of most of the party, things get harder than they've been since Onett, maybe even harder. Krakens return, not as mini-bosses, but just as regular enemies. Other enemies are more abstract and nonsensical, my favorite being the Kiss of Death. I've heard some theories, but with Ness being on the verge of teenagehood, that this enemy represents his inner fear of dating and love. Funnily, in the Japanese version during Magicant, Ness is actually naked the whole time, a fact that no one ever seems to bring up. In the center of Ness's mind is his worst nightmare, a statue resembling the Mani Mani statue, that is the culmination of his evil thoughts. Here it is. To many, the most difficult fight in the game, and I have to agree, at least if you didn't overground like I did. Ness's nightmare knows all of Ness's best moves. It can heal, create shields, use PK Flash, and yes, it's possible that it could insta-kill the player with it. And worst of all, it knows PK Rockin', one of the few characters that can use it besides Ness himself, which is fitting considering it's part of him. No matter your level, a Rockin' Omega will probably deal mortal damage. Make sure you've got enough recovery items and PP to power through. After Ness purges the evil in his heart, he hears his own voice, telling him what he must do. This isn't some god, some other character, prophet, it's him, his own power. It tells him to go to Saturn Valley, and to fulfill his destiny. Ness's powers then rapidly expand. Each sanctuary's power flows through him, increasing his powers exponentially. He gains an insane amount of XP, gaining a number of level ups, and increasing his HP and PP by the hundreds. And finally, he realizes he has the power of Teleport Beta. Ness unlocks every power hidden away inside of him. Power not gained, but power he's had all along. Ness then awakens, with a massive destiny to fulfill. He and his friends then teleport to Saturn Valley. Dr. Onett, the Mr. Saturns, Apple Kid, and that one minor guy have all worked together to create the phase distorter at long last. Unfortunately, the first model was taken by a mysterious figure, and the second model needs a special material that can only be found in meteors. So once again, the group must head back to Onett to get some from the meteor there. Unlike last time, Gygas has put his army's full might into Ness's hometown. Monsters roam the streets, all the buildings are closed, even ones that don't have doors. The enemies are super strong too, they can diamondize you. The Ghost of Starman can use PK Starstorm Alpha, which is pretty much guaranteed to cause mortal damage to Paula, and maybe even Jeff and Pooh depending on their levels. Seeing the town in this shape is unnerving. Sure, Onett isn't come back to as much as, let's say, Toaddown and Paper Mario, and to be quite honest, with the exception of getting the book, I pretty much never returned to it until now. But it still feels depressing. This is his town, his home, and now it's in worse shape than Freed was. It's not gonna return to daytime after completing the quest either. Onett is gonna stay like this until Gygas is defeated. The only building unlocked is Ness's home, where the party can heal. There's no boss on top of the hill thankfully, so getting the piece of the meteor doesn't take long. The second phase distorter can now be completed, but before using it, be sure to 1. Save, and 2. Get prepared. It warps the group to a weird cliff. The Master comes along and teaches Pooh Starstorm Omega, and there's this Mr. Saturn talking about the guy who kidnapped him, along with the old broken phase distorter. Dr. Onett warps there next. Having completed the third model of the phase distorter, Gygas has traveled into the past to prevent the future from coming into existence. The phase distorter Mark III can do just that. However, one small issue, it cannot carry living things. Dr. Onett has a workaround though, the transfer of a group's souls into robots. Even worse, he can't quite guarantee that any of their souls will be able to make it back home after the battle, with the only other option being the death of all people on Earth, the chosen 4 accept their fate. What follows is kind of disturbing. A drill sound effect plays over a black screen, with no music, as each of their minds get transferred. Welcome to the Cave of the Past, one of the most unnerving levels in gaming, blowing free completely out of the water. Firstly, the heroes are now robots, and not even humanoid ones, resembling their former bodies. Imagine being stuck like this forever. Next, the actual landscape is unnatural. There's nothing organic or living here. The music doesn't help either, having a hellish echo, almost like you can hear the souls of the damned. Worst of all, there is no way to ever leave again, so whatever you do, do not save here, or there is no way to get more items or visit other areas. I actually have a personal story about the cave too. The first time I played Earthbound, from the old copy I have, I didn't start a new save file right away. I did what I always do. Check out the other save files from other people who had the cart before me. Well, the first file I opened led to the Cave of the Past. This scared the shit out of me as a kid. Even worse, another file started off at Ness's house post-invasion, with every party member dead except for Paula. I'm so glad that I did not let that initial first impression stop me from starting a new file and having fun. The enemies here are obviously the toughest. Ness is basically an unkillable god at this point. The rest of the crew, not so much. The Cave of the Past, despite being such a remembered dungeon, is actually extremely short, with no puzzles, no mazes, just strong enemies. Eventually, the player will stumble upon another cave entrance. Entering it, the players find themselves in what appears to be intestines, almost as if you're inside of a living body. The path leads to an egg or eye, opening to reveal Ness's face. Before you can think about what's even going on, Pokey comes into the scene. We've seen him working for Gygus' underlings up to this point, but now he's become his right-hand man. Gygus has become a godlike being, no longer being the mere wielder of evil, but the embodiment of evil itself. Now the ultimate battle begins. Gygus has a super shield around him, deflecting any attack, and it cannot be disabled. What you're supposed to do is attack Pokey's mech. Just don't use any moves that target all enemies like rockin', unless you really want to die. An interesting question regarding Pokey's role in the story is how much has he been influenced by Gygus? Most foes under his control appear blue. Pokey here looks blue, and the way he speaks seems a little out of character in some ways. On the flip side though, he's been behind nefarious actions before this point, like kidnapping Paula. Plus in Mother 3, he's even more evil than he is while under Gygus' control. My personal headcanon is that Gygus merely brings out the worst in people, but can't force them to do things they don't have a secret desire to do. The soundtrack for this phase is incredible too. It starts off with a catchy chiptune, only to evolve into heavy rock. Impressive in regards to the 16-bit era. Too bad it doesn't last very long. Once Pokey takes enough damage, he disables the Devil's Machine containing Gygus. With all the power he's obtained, Gygus has gone from a Mewtwo or Frieza-like alien to no longer even having a tangible body. Pokey mentions how he's not even conscious or sentient anymore, just an unstable, Lovecraftian, incomprehensible power. The only remnants of his former self are what appears to be a face in a chaotic mess, and his few lines of incoherent dialogue. In this phase, he can be damaged, the only phase where it's possible to do so. Once Gygus takes a few thousand damage, he becomes even more unstable. Even Pokey himself is an absolute terror. In this third phase, Gygus cannot be beaten with normal attacks. PK Rocket, Starstorm, multi-bottle rockets will do nothing. The only thing the group can do is pray. Pray for help. Pray for safety. Pray that their efforts are not futile. Paula's prayers transcend space and time to make it back home, where all the people that the group has helped, everyone they know, feel the trouble they're in. Countless people throughout the earth then begin to pray for the safety of Ness and his friends, Dr. Anonauts, Apple Kid and the Mr. Saturns, the Runaway Five, Paula's parents, Tony, and the other students of Winters, the women of the Lom, Frank, Ness's mother, Tracy, King, and many more. I like to believe that many more people worldwide, like Vitenda, Mr. Monatali, and the people of Freed Prey too. The only reason you don't see that is so this battle isn't an hour long. Each prayer hurts Gygas, with each subsequent prayer doing more and more damage to him. Gygas then enters his fourth and final stage, becoming so distorted that he resembles TB Static more than anything else. Even all those prayers couldn't stop him. Paula can't think of anyone else to call out to, and even if she did, her prayers are now being stopped by the darkness. Just then, a mysterious person starts praying. Despite having never met them, they keep praying, doing insane damage. Who are they? You. No, not Ness. You, the player, personally pray to save the Chosen Four. All these prayers combined are finally too much for Gygas as he begins to glitch out. Pokey then comes in to have the last word before slipping away to another era. Following that, Gygas dies in the most epic way possible. The war against Gygas is finally over. The souls of the Chosen Four, some way, somehow, are able to leave their robot bodies to return to the present day. The heroes then awaken and go their own ways. Pooh says PSI farewell and goes back to the Lom. Jeff has forgiven his father and decides to stay with him in Saturn Valley, and Paula wants Ness to escort her home. If you're unconvinced about their feelings for each other now, I don't know what to say, especially since the song playing is titled Because I Love You. No enemies appear after this, letting the two lovebirds have their moment of peace without any interruptions. Back in Tucson, Paula and Ness finally part ways. Unfortunately, the two never have a big confession like Anna and Nintendo did. Their parting feels a little anticlimactic, but the way Paula's parents act makes it a little more open-ended. They straight up think the two are officially dating. Even Paula's overprotective dad is happy with Ness dating Paula, so, by himself now, Ness heads back home. A lot of people around the world have different dialogue. Frank now has a job as a cashier, and Pokey's parents have divorced, which is pretty depressing, honestly. Finally reaching home, Ness and his mom look at that photo album that the Fuzzy Pickles photographer guy made, ending the adventure at long last. And that was Earthbound. Without a doubt, one of the greatest games of all time, and by far my favorite RPG. I love the characters, the battle system, the dialogue, the witty humor, the lands, the bosses, the enemies, the story, the main cast, and a whole lot more. It's such a shame that the game flopped in the US. It just goes to show that the critics are not always right. I would highly recommend you check it out too, if you haven't already. Getting an original copy is out of the question obviously unless you're rich, but thankfully, Earthbound has been released on a few more Nintendo consoles. Firstly, there's Mother 1+2 on a GBA, although it only came out in Japan, and most feel like it's an inferior port. Then a re-release on a Wii U in 2013 and 3DS in 2016. Unfortunately, since the eShop shut down, these versions can no longer be bought. When the SNES Classic launched in 2017, one of the titles it came with was Earthbound, and it's available on Switch Online as well currently. The re-releases have a few changes though, like blur effects that I really don't like that much. While I don't emulate myself, to be quite honest, emulation is the best way to go in this case. Overall, I love this game to death, however, I will admit that this playthrough has probably been the least fun playthrough I have ever had playing it. I've just been kind of in this exhausted and depressed funk while playing it, which is weird because it's summer break. But I just did not have all that much fun, if I'm being honest, especially at the beginning. For a while, I didn't even feel like I was really playing the game, and I kinda wish I would have played it through again at a different time, where I would have been able to get more invested, when I had more energy, and when I was less anxious. I feel like this would have been a much better video had I done that. Strangely though, this actually might be the first time for a good while where I feel like I could give it another playthrough right after. Now, I usually don't replay games until years after I last played them anymore, but I don't know, I think I may give Earthbound and maybe the other Mothers another playthrough later this year. Speaking of that though, next time on Alpha Leaf Gaming, we're finishing this trilogy with the third Mother game. One that I have a complicated relationship with. One that is seen as the best by many fans. One that has never been released in the US, and that's Mother 3. I hope to see you all there.